All right, let's talk about something that's basically a user manual for the workplace. Organizational behavior. This is the stuff that helps you understand all those hidden human forces that can make or break a company's success. I mean, seriously, think about it. We've all seen this happen, right? A brilliant plan, a great product, and it gets totally derailed by people issues. Well, understanding organizational behavior, or OB as it's called, is like getting a superpower. It lets you see and even influence the invisible dynamics that are driving everything at work. So, at its core, OB is really the science of making work better for everyone. It kind of zooms in on individuals, then it pans out to look at teams, and then it takes this big wide-angle shot of the whole company. And the whole point is to figure out what makes an organization really tick, and then, actually apply that knowledge. So where do you even start? Well, everything begins at the micro level, with the individual, you, me, every single person on the team. And if you really want to get why people do what they do at work, you've got to look at 3 fundamental pillars of our behavior. First up is personality. And we're talking about more than just being an introvert or an extrovert. Think of it as our default setting. It's that consistent pattern in how we think, feel, and act that makes one person a super meticulous planner and somebody else a, spontaneous, creative problem solver. And the Big 5 model gives us this really powerful framework for understanding this. The research here is just crystal clear. Some of these traits have a massive impact. I mean, just look at conscientiousness. It is one of the single best predictors of job performance out there. And it makes sense, right? Responsible, organized people, they just consistently get stuff done. Okay, our second pillar is perception. This is the unique mental filter that every single one of us has, and here's the kicker. We don't act based on objective reality. We act based on our perception of reality. That's huge. It explains why 2 people can get the exact same feedback from a manager, and one person hears helpful critique, while the other one hears, uh-oh, I'm about to get fired. And the final building block, motivation. This is the engine. This is what's behind all of our actions. It's not just about, working hard. It's about how hard we work, what we're actually working towards, and how long we can keep that effort going. It's the why that fuels absolutely everything we do. And there's a really fascinating insight on this from a guy named Frederick Herzberg. He found that the things that make us unhappy at work are not the opposite of what makes us happy. It's kind of weird, right? So fixing what he calls hygiene factors, like a bad company policy or low salary, that just stops people from being dissatisfied. It doesn't make them happy. To actually create satisfaction, to make people love their jobs, you need motivators, things like a sense of achievement, recognition, and real opportunities for growth. Okay, so that's the individual. But what happens when we put a bunch of individuals together in a room? Now we're zooming out to the group level, and a whole new set of forces and crazy dynamics comes into play. It turns out most teams actually follow a pretty predictable path on their way to becoming a high-performing unit. They start out in the forming stage, but then they almost always hit the storming phase. And that's that bumpy, often conflict-heavy period where, let's be honest, a lot of teams get stuck. But if they can push through that, they start to norm, set the rules, and then finally they start performing, which is where the real, amazing, effective work gets done. But there is a dark side to all this group harmony, a really dangerous pitfall called groupthink. This is what happens when the pressure to conform, the pressure to just get along, becomes so strong that it completely steamrolls critical thinking and any kind of realistic decision-making. You can totally spot the symptoms. It's when people start censoring their own doubts, keeping quiet even when they disagree. It's when silence gets mistaken for agreement. It's when anyone who dares to speak up gets a ton of pressure put on them. It creates this false sense of we all agree that can lead to absolutely disastrous decisions, all because nobody was willing to be the one to rock the boat. Okay, now for the final zoom out. Individuals and groups, they don't operate in some kind of bubble. They exist inside a bigger organizational context, and that context sets all the rules of the game, both the written ones and, more importantly, the unwritten ones. So, the first set of rules comes from the organizational structure. This is the company's formal blueprint. The org chart, the official reporting lines. It's the whole framework that dictates who does what and how all the pieces are supposed to fit together. And listen, every structure comes with trade-offs. There's no perfect answer. A functional structure, where you group people by their expertise, like marketing or finance, that's super efficient, but it can create these terrible silos. On the other hand, a divisional structure is way more flexible, but you can easily end up with duplicated roles and a whole lot of wasted effort. But here's the thing. Even more powerful than that formal structure is the organization's culture. You should really think of this as the company's personality. It's the social fabric of the place, and it shapes behavior in these really profound, often totally unspoken ways. People often just describe it as how things get done around here, and that's such a perfect way to put it. Culture is that invisible force that guides everything, from how you're supposed to speak in a meeting to what kind of ideas get celebrated. It's the shared understanding that truly defines what it feels like to work at a place. So, what's the big takeaway from all this? We've looked at the individual, the group, the whole organization. How do we pull this all together and turn this knowledge into that workplace superpower we were talking about at the beginning? And here it is. This is the single most important idea to grasp. These levels are not separate. They are locked in a constant feedback loop. Think about it. An individual's personality affects their team's dynamic, right? And that team's dynamic is shaped by the overall company culture. And that culture, in turn, influences who gets hired in the first place. It is all one big, interconnected system. And that leaves us with a final thought to really chew on. If you had to make the biggest possible positive change in a workplace, where would you start? With an individual's motivation? With a team's cohesiveness? Or would you go after the organization's culture? Just understanding how these forces work together is the first step to answering that question, and really to navigating your own career a whole lot more effectively.